Welcome to the Heart of the Cards, a conversation about creativity, inspiration, and dealing with what we're dealt. With your hosts, Dan Green and Eric Stuart.
Welcome to the Heart of the Cards. I'm Dan Green, and I am joined by the beautiful and talented Eric Stuart, who you know from many wonderful voiceover performances in anime and other animations, as well as his wonderful music that he creates with the Eric Stuart Band.
Thank you. It's great to be here again with you, Dan Green, amazing voiceover actor, and also quite attractive, I must say.
Well, no.
Oh, you might also know from fantastic shows like Yu-Gi-Oh! He is both Yami and Yugi, which is amazing that he can talk out of both sides of his mouth. Usually you have to pay an attorney a lot to do that.
I should look into that.
Yes. And also a talented artist and writer and director as well. Yes.
Oh, shucks.
Yes, kudos to you.
So, in this episode, we're dealing with another point on the hero's journey, which you can think of as sort of being in a wheel or a circle. And for those of you who are new to this, and for those of you who have been following along, we're using Joseph Cambell's The Hero's Journey as just a way of sparking a conversation. The Heart of the Cards is a discussion about creativity, inspiration, and dealing with what you're dealt. Good things and bad. All of those interface together to form the path of our lives. And we're using the hero's journey as just a way to look at those touchstones that really can be applied to anybody's life. It's often used as a structure to create stories, movies, books, even songs. And this week, we're dealing with what is often referred to as the trials.
Ooh.
So there's the call to adventure, there's the refusal of the call, there's the mentor that you find along the way, there's leaving the realm that you're familiar with, and the trials is the step where it's not the final moment, it's not the big ordeal at the end. It's all those things that condition the hero to become ready for the ultimate challenge that they may face. So it's sort of like if you were to compare it to a season of sports. It's not the final, it's not the Super Bowl, right? But it's the semifinals, it's the finals, it's the so forth.
Good analogy. Yes. Very sports ball of you. I like that.
Yeah, I know of those. I've heard of sports balls. Yeah. And if you were to compare it to a movie, it would be sort of like the middle of the movie. It's usually the longest part of the movie. And also what's indicative or emblematic of that stage of trials is that this is also where the protagonist may find new allies and means of support, and or potentially turn an opponent into a friend, or so on and so forth. So with that in mind, another element of the trials that is meaningful is that it's not the final confrontation. So it's that experience of life, that experience of trying to get something done where you're butting up against different kinds of hurdles, or maybe the same hurdle again and again, and having the perseverance and resilience and endurance to get you further down that path. So anybody, I think, can relate to that. Certainly in these currently challenging times,
sure,
we're so rich with challenges that confront us every day. Whether it's the pandemic or there's another hurricane coming. I think we just had one last week.
I know.
And I can start with a couple of things. I'm sure, Eric, you have a couple of things as well. Maybe we'll just go like back and forth. I'll do one, you'll do one.
Sure, that's great. Yeah. No,
okay.
Definitely.
I'll start off, and some of you who know a bit about my background and my personal life are aware that about 10 years ago, I lost my wife, and she died in childbirth. There were complications in the delivery of our twins. So this is, an obvious challenge for anybody experiencing any kind of loss, and specifically the loss of your spouse. And I wanted to, I won't get into every detail of that experience, but in terms of how it applies to the ideal of the challenges that it presents day to day and over time, I'm going to look at it through that angle. So my wife wanted more than anything in her life to be a mom. She tried to scare me off on our first date. She said, I want to be married. I want to have kids. and I knew better than to be afraid because she was so compelling. But at that time in my life, I was in my early 30s, and even though in my 20s I had this idea that it was, I really wanted to get married and have that domestic life. In my early 30s, I was more in the state of mind of I'm okay with whichever way the wind breaks. I would be happy with that, but I didn't feel like I needed that to define my life. And then I met Michael. And so our journey to actually just becoming parents was a challenging one, a hard one. We dealt with, like many people do, infertility issues. And for 7 years, we struggled to get pregnant.
Wow.
And a lot of people would have not stayed the course, which is not a judgment like they failed. It's just, it is hard. And in those 7 years, I never saw my wife be more stronger or more committed or more resilient. And I think for a lot of relationships, that kind of tension and sadness, because when you're not having something that you both really want to have, it's its own form of grief in a sense, because you're not getting this thing that is essential to who you want to become, right? Mm-hmm. And it obscures other things in your life that you would normally be happy about. A friend of mine had a very similar struggle, though not as many years long. And then when he and his wife got pregnant, you would think I would be overjoyed, but I wasn't.
Right.
I mean,
right.
I was, and I wasn't.
Wondering.
Right.
I was wondering
like,
how did you deal with seeing, friends in the same age group, the same
exactly,
in your circle of friends, because they're all reaching that sort of same choices in their lives, like it's time to start a family, and you feel bad that you don't feel good, right?
Yeah. That's exactly right. I felt guilty that I felt like they were getting something that I didn't have, right? And the feelings were very mixed, and of course, a sensitive friend would understand that. And I have great friends, but it was a mixed bag, and it muted not only your ability to feel good about where you specifically are, but even where others that you love and care about are in their own lives. So it was a real veil over everything. And then we finally, after 7 years, and Michael did all the things that you can do to increase your chances of fertility. And we did several rounds of in vitro fertilization. For those who don't know, that's when you fertilize the eggs outside the body and then put them back in. And anyway, so after 7 years, we finally got pregnant, and we felt so relieved to get that far, finally. And then we learned it was twins. So that was even better. And when we went in for the sonogram, I forget, it was, I guess, the 3 months along. And that's when you can determine the genders.
Right.
And I was, fine with any outcome that we had both genders. That was even like more of a home run, right? We covered the bases, to mix up metaphors again. So that was great. Now, as you're also a parent and you understand that those 9 months are, especially your first time, that's a very, very specific prism in your life, right?
Yes.
Becoming a father. You didn't have a great relationship with your natural father.
Right.
Yep. So I think that adds to the sort of what ifs and what am I going to do and how am I going to fulfill that role.
Sure.
And those are sort of the more bigger, grand philosophical questions. But I also think a lot of it, like anybody, is how are we going to pay for all this? And
it's funny. As a side note, I said if people waited to figure out how they were going to pay for kids before they had kids, they would never have kids. It's basically you do it, and then you're like, we're going to figure it out.
Yep. And that reminds me of a phrase one of my wife's friends used, like the universe provides, or something along those lines.
Right.
Yeah, and you do find a path. But anyway, so then comes the time where, well, we wanted to do a natural birth, but that was impossible. They were in a breech position, so we had to schedule for the C-section, and we ended up having to go in a day or two before our scheduled C-section because Michael also had preeclampsia, which is a condition that's very serious, and the remedy to that is to deliver the kids. So anyway. And without getting into great detail about the specific events of that night and what happened, the children were delivered. Everything seemed to be fine for a while, and they always tell the spouse to go down and watch the kids getting cleaned up, and as they do what they need to do to stitch the mom back up. And I remember those moments so clearly of watching the kids getting all, cleaned off, and their hair, the little bit of hair that they had was a little fluffy. And you see all these other little kids, and just, who isn't adorable at that age, right? Right. And it felt like this tremendous journey, all these trials, these 7 years of hope and disappointment. Because along the way, when you're trying to get pregnant, you're going to have positives, right? And then they don't last, right? So you feel like you've made it, and then that feels taken away from you.
Now, can I ask you a question?
Yeah,
I don't mean
sure,
to interrupt you, but so during the 7 years, when you'd get to a point and then it wouldn't work, what did the two of you do, like leaning on each other, in terms of, you're talking about trials and finding allies, right? To get through these sort of situations. What was the magic that, besides the love for each other, that you were able to get back and say, no, we're going to do it. We're going to try again. We'll try again. I mean, as you said in the beginning, 7 years of this, many people would not try that long. They would just say, or I'm adopted. So at some point they would say, maybe there's another way to go around about this to create a family. What was your secret to, how did that dynamic work? Did one of you give up and the other one had to say, come on, we can do, or were you constantly in sync? I'm just curious about that, because it seems like the two of you, it's like the two of you against the world in that situation.
Yeah, it is. It feels like the two of you against nature.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Right.
And you can only sort of fight nature to a degree, but nature's always going to win.
Right.
So in those moments, it was when we're further, at first they say, the people are encouraging, and maybe all you need to do is this, or and some of that strength came from friends, and I think it's true that, I don't know how you feel about this, and I hope you tell me, but getting pregnant, the guy is relevant to that experience, but it's much more the woman's thing, right? Yep. And so I felt my role was to be there, right? To be supportive, not blindly or stupidly, but supportive. So I think that if Michael weren't so determined, if Michael weren't so insistent, even stubborn, right, that it wouldn't have happened. Right. If Michael had said at some point, "This is too much for me. Let's do adoption, or let's just get a dog or something."
Right. So she never gave up on the quest for that.
Like a zealot, she could not be deterred.
So that really answers my question: is that there might have been times where you might have thought, Do we do something different? Maybe you might not have even voiced that, but thought it. But you knew that's okay. That makes a lot of sense. Well, I'm impressed with the way that a couple can bond and work through things like that. Because many stressful situations, you look for blame. You look for something to because it can't be. I'm glad you said it's against nature. I mean, you can't fight. You can't beat that, right? So not taking it out on each other, but working together as a team is a very impressive thing.
As an independent production company, Andromeda greatly benefits from the support of its audience. If you're able to contribute as little as $1 a month, consider going to our Patreon page. Any support you can give means a lot to us creators, and we're excited to bring you more. Visit AndromedaProductions.com and see what's in store. If this is content you enjoy, please like, subscribe, and share on YouTube.
So anyway, I'm sorry.
Well, and I
interrupt,
should also,
but this- yeah.
no, that's a great question, and I should also add that our last attempt was not our last attempt only because it was successful, but that was really our last attempt. And
Really?
then we were going to look to, adoption. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So I'm there seeing my children for the first time, and there was this definite palpable sense of it's a positive feeling. It's a generic way of saying it, but I had never felt so heightened in a positive way, and I've had some pretty awesome experiences in my life, but really nothing compared to that. And I think it probably felt even more so because of the journey, because of the hard path that we had to fight to get there. And then I was made aware that there were issues, and then several hours later, despite all the efforts to save her, my wife passed away. So this then becomes a whole other experience. And anybody who's lost somebody is going to relate to what I'm talking about. It doesn't matter who you've lost or what you've lost. Grief in many ways feels the same, even though we all experience it in our own individual ways. And one of my friends, I mentioned this before when we were talking about mentors, I had this therapist who was quite helpful to me. We worked together for 10 years or so. And then after that therapy ended, we stayed in touch and were friends. And many days later, weeks later even, I was touching base with him about this, and he compared it to, life, if you think of life as a train station, and you have this train come in, that's like when you get, you graduate, and you have this train in, and that's when you get married, and you have this train in, and that's when you have children, and then you have this train in, and that's like when your parents pass away. And he set that up to say, it's like you had all the trains coming into the station at once,
Right. Exactly.
The most dramatic part, the most intense part of that, yes, I'm like crying, and my wife died on a Friday. Every Friday after that, for many months, sucked. And even when I kept working mainly to keep myself busy, because I didn't just want to only be surrounded by grief. And also it was important for me to keep working. I needed to, make some money. But when I was we were living in Manhattan at the time, and when I was on the subway ride back home from whatever work I was doing that day, I would cry. I wouldn't try to cry, but I also wouldn't stop trying to cry. And I got to say, in New York, because there are so many people, you can be anonymous.
Sure.
Nobody gets in your face, right? And if I were to reach out and ask for help, I'm sure somebody would have been there for me. But but there's so much going on around you in New York that you typically keep to your own.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And and I would come home, and I had a nanny that I worked with, and then the nanny would leave, and I would also have another kind of overwrought experience. And it wasn't because the nanny wasn't there to help me, and I didn't feel like I could take care of these kids for the night. It was because once the nanny left, that was now my home and my family without any, outsider. And I couldn't help but feel her absence most of all.
I can't even imagine. I can't.
Yeah.
And to be dealing with what's supposed to be the most joyous time.
Yeah, right.
Hand in hand with the saddest time. I mean, it is amazing that you were able to keep it together, even to go to work. And I will say very imperfectly. Okay.
Right. I'm not a shining model of. I definitely have had and will continue to have my issues, and that mixture of the good and the bad. To this day, in like the best moments, those shining moments that parents will reflect. Oh, that my child learned how to ride a bike, or
right.
They accomplished something that they're really proud of. There's always that combination that that Michael isn't there.
Right, the absence of that.
Yeah.
Of course. I mean, I as I said, I can't even imagine. But
Yeah.
you know, as someone who I think knows you quite well,
Yes, you do.
and I am very proud to call you a dear friend. Is that those that might know you from the outside, you know, you carry yourself with, you definitely have a presence of, I would say there is a guard up, because you're very personable, but you also, you know, it's not like someone's going to run up and grab you and hug you immediately.
Right.
But the minute they get to know you, they realize that there is a much deeper emotional, sensitive side to you that, when the nanny left, you were also allowed to be that person who you really are. Right? Mm-hmm. You didn't have to put on any sort of face to be like, I've got my stuff together. I can handle this. It's like when even though the kids were there, you were alone and you could be completely vulnerable.
Yes.
Which I would say, as a good friend of yours, I've seen that in person, you know, and you've seen that from me in person. But I completely understand why you would need to let it all out.
Oh, yeah.
In times like that. I mean, please. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't think anyone would question that.
Yeah.
But I did work with you during that time.
Sure did.
And I don't think we addressed it to a degree, just so that people would acknowledge that was something that you were dealing with. But it was never, and I have said this to this day, it will never define who you are to me. It's part of who you are, but it doesn't define who you are. So I think you did a great job working. You might not have felt like it was your best work, but I did not notice a difference as a director working with you. So I just wanted to add that in there. So.
Oh, well, thank you for that. And what I mean by imperfectly, yeah, I mean, actually there were sessions where I feel like I was just off and because of everything that was going on, but I just mean as a human being, like, you know, sure. And I don't think that anybody can go through grief cleanly. It's messy. It's inherently messy. But another thing that I want to throw in here, and I want to hear what you want to talk about. So it's easy to think of, okay, that happened almost 10 years ago, and sure, it was intense, you know, for the first year or whatever, but then it got better. And in some ways, that's accurate. I've heard of grief as a weight that you get better and better at carrying. I think that's a good comparison. But I also think it's important to share that it's still hard. It's never easy. You get better at doing something, sure, but you know, again, to use sports comparisons that I'm really unqualified to make, you know, you can't ski down a mountain and lose your focus, right? It's never that easy, right? And this, I think, applies universally just to being a parent. There's a whole bunch of you don't know. There's a whole bunch of uncertainty, right? Especially if, you know, you don't have any other kids, and so, you know, I have trials every day. There's some point where I cry, not cry uncontrollably, not cry for hours and hours. Maybe it's just a little misting of the eyes and tears that I can wipe away. But that happens every day. I mean, now it's just a part of my system, right? It's but I don't dwell on it. I just accept that that's a part of me now. And you know, going through this certainly wasn't the way that I thought I would become a father. I didn't anticipate the 7 years of infertility. I didn't anticipate the loss of my wife the day the kids were born. Nobody saw that coming. And there's this old movie called Raiders of the Lost Ark. and more than halfway through this movie, which is, you know, sort of the trials part of the story for him anyway, the protagonist is confronted with yet another challenge. And his ally says, "What are you going to do?" And Indiana Jones says, "I don't know. I'm making this up as I go." Right? And That line always gets a laugh because you don't expect the hero to say something so honest and self-effacing. But I think it also always gets a laugh because everyone relates to that.
Yeah.
Some challenges you can approach with a plan of attack, but there's also a lot of you just don't know, and you hop on that horse and you chase down that truck. And you figure it out from there.
Or that train.
or
right.
Whatever. Yeah. You plug in your metaphor, but yeah. Wow. And I think that's largely what this experience of trials is like. I mean, with the pandemic, there's these surges and then there's not, and we're not exactly sure where this is going.
Yeah, that's true.
So, but thank you for listening to that.
No. I mean,
what about? Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say. I mean, that's. We don't know. I always think of the phrase, walk a mile in my shoes. It's like you don't know what someone else is going through. You can relate to the emotional side of it,
sure.
or try to think to yourself, oh, how would I react to that? Or try to relate to a loss, in your own life. You say, well, but it to me, I still think. What is amazing to me is that you do have two amazing, beautiful children.
Oh yeah. Oh, I should. Yeah, that people should know that. Yes.
And
not only do I like my kids, but many other people do too. So that's a good sign.
Yes. Yeah. And it's just interesting. I'm not. I think we've discussed this before. I'm not a religious person, but I'm definitely like a spiritual sort of the energy of the world kind of thing.
Yeah.
And this is one of those question marks where you say. Why did this happen this way? And if it did happen this way, like what can we get from this that is good and beneficial?
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of all of that tragedy is the creation of these two amazing children. And so I mean, one does not outweigh the other. They're different emotions and they're different parts of that journey. And one might be more of the trial side of it, even though I have two children and I know trying to raise two kids is definitely considered trials. But no, and I think you're a fantastic father. I think you.
Thank you.
I mean, many people could have just thrown their hands up and said, this is just too much for me to handle." And if anything, you are much more of a hands-on father than many people that I know. So,
just to put a tag on that, one of my earlier trials when I lost my father, I was 4, so I did get a chance to know him. But I grew up with an understanding of what single parenting looks like from the child's perspective.
Yep.
So that did inform me, I think, to be a little bit more hands-on, I think, than not to accuse or judge my mom in terms of how she handled it. But
right.
Trials inform each other, and you build off of them. Hopefully, you can make something out of them that's constructive. So
well, I went so thinking about how I can follow that up, which. Definitely, is a challenge in itself.
It's not a contest.
I know, but I'm sure the listeners are like,
wait a minute, Eric. Let me stop you right there. So, are you saying that perhaps you are searching for some wizardly words of wisdom?
Well, that could help. I wonder where we'd get that from.
Well, maybe we should listen to some, and then that'll spark you on to something else.
Sounds good. Good
that
call.
That guy knows what he's talking about, right?
He does know what he's talking about, and he seems to know a lot about a lot.
Yes.
Or actually, he doesn't have a long list, so it's a little about a lot.
A little about I bet he just has a good internet connection.
Yes, excellent.
But so back to you.
Yes. So you're the idea of trials, and you had mentioned, dealing with the pandemic and everything else that's going on in the world, which seems to be completely the madness, as I call it.
Yeah.
One of the things that I've always sort of battled between is, I can get to some pretty dark places. I definitely, I wouldn't say that I'm dealing with depression all the time, but I definitely, I think that creative mind, that doesn't stop moving, overanalyzing everything, whether it's worry or the other side, the manic side, whatever. And so I think the thing that really was a trial for me.
Oh, yeah, with the pandemic, you mean?
Yeah, well, and look, everybody has their own story about this, whether they lost people, whether they got sick themselves, or they lost their jobs, or everybody's got a story, and everyone will have. I mean, these stories will go on. I mean, and probably be told over and over again, because this was such an extreme amount of just devastation across the world. But it's the individual stories. And for someone like me who, at least my experience with this of following the guidelines and locking myself up. Now I'm a fan of alone time. I like to create. I like to create in my cave, my bat cave, and I do my best work as a solo writer, and I like to collaborate with people. But I find that alone time is where I thrive. But with that comes the outlet, and with that comes the interaction. And it's not so much of an ego thing of needing to be in front of people to perform, or I need the spotlight on me. But if art is done and never shared, you sometimes ask yourself, why do I even bother? And so in the normal times, I would still question, is this a good enough song? Do I need to, is it worth playing for people, worth, sharing? But in this time, it was, okay, so I can create this stuff, but what am I going to do with it? I can't see people I care about, so I can't play them the song in person and see what they think, whether it's band members, interaction. I can't perform in front of an audience and test out material the way that I did. Now, this may seem trivial to people as like, oh, come on, there were worse things that were going on. But what it did to me was it got me to a point where I had no motivation to do anything.
Wow.
And let me just interject here. The concept of you not doing anything is like a fish not wanting to swim. That's not you. Yes, I know. I definitely am guilty of no downtime. And even when I do downtime stuff, I multitask. So like I'm a big video game player, but when I game, I'm usually riding my exercise bike because that's something I could do at the same time. And but so that even being said, so I stopped exercising. I stopped writing. I stopped playing guitar. At one point, Lindsay, who I love and is amazing, would say to me, "Why don't you do what everybody else is doing and play online?" And I said, "That's not the same for me. I don't want to do that." And she's like, "Oh, is it because you need that? You need to be, with an audience or something like that? Is it thinking about the whole sort of ego thing?" I said, "No, it's as a performing songwriter, I interact with the audience, even if it's not, something that you're paying attention to. I play a song or two and I see how the audience is responding, and you change the setup based on, do they seem to like the slower songs? Do we need to, I never have a set list. I have songs on a set list and I flip them around based on that dance, as I call it, with the audience, right? So you take away that, because online stuff, I know, look, I have friends that did it. I have friends that made money doing it. I tuned in to watch them do it, and it was just weird to me. It was like I was a fly on the wall watching the show. It's like, is there, like when you go to see a movie, like a funny movie in a movie theater, and when one person laughs, the whole audience laughs, right? Yeah. It's contagious, right? It's contagious. Yeah. Well, here, like watching music in these Zoom things or whatever, it was in between songs, it was quiet. You'd see a little thing pop up and someone would text in, a little message that say, I love that song. It's my favorite. Yeah. Well, it would have been nicer if I could have heard your applause,
Sure.
right? So you take away all of that dynamic.
Right.
And for me,
and sometimes you have a more than one song that can really hit in the heart.
Well, thank you.
And no, it's true. And the applause are different.
Yes.
After that, or the reaction. Sometimes it's the silence that is the most because you got them.
Exactly.
Or you know that they're processing in a way that you hope to get them to.
Yeah, and as a performer, I mean, you're a fellow performer, you're a stage actor, you've done this stuff. Could you imagine doing a play with no audience and no?
Well, there would be a lot less rotten fruit thrown at me. That's one thing.
Exactly, but that's the magic of the right thing.
Oh, but you mean the negative of? I see what you're doing.
Right. So you take so all of that stuff was taken away. The interaction, not seeing family,
right?
Just feeling even more isolated. And I really felt like I as a guitar player, you have to play all the time to keep the calluses on your fingers, or else it starts to hurt. Right? They go away, and it starts to hurt, and then you got to build them back up again. And I think it might have taken me. I mean, I might have picked up a guitar here and there because I did what Steve Martin did, which when he wanted to get back to playing banjos, he hung them all up around his house and put them on stands so they were out. So I have guitars out all over my house because no matter where I am, I if I'm sitting in the living room, I have one hanging on the wall. I could just read the news and finger pick and stuff like that. So I did that, but I probably just picked up a guitar for 2 seconds and then put it down. I didn't practice. I didn't do anything. And at one point, it might have been almost a year of really not playing. Lindsay said, will you just play some guitar for me? Like, I'm an audience. Play some guitar for me. And I was like, okay. And so she had a guitar at her house, and we're sitting there and hanging out, and she's like, I've been playing ukulele. We can play some songs together. And I picked up the guitar, and it hurt.
Oh, boy.
For the first time in, I mean, I've been playing guitar for 30 years. For the first time in 30 years, I started to play and I was looking at my fingers and saying, it's really been that long. Like, I need to build up my calluses again. This is ridiculous. So we played a little bit, and then she would say, we would look up songs on her phone so that she could learn how to play them on the ukulele, and we'd play other people's music. And then slowly I would start to play a couple of my songs for her. But I had nothing that I was working towards in terms of, like, what was I going to do with this?
Right.
What was I going to do with this? Because the way the world was going, I'm thinking to myself, live music isn't coming back for a long time.
Yeah.
And if it does come back, what's it going to be? How are we going to do this? Are we ever going to feel safe and secure to do it this way? And these things are going around in your mind because it's so confusing about how we're supposed to follow certain protocols.
It's still not clear.
No, and and I'm I won't say I'm a hypochondriac, but like I definitely follow, like, when my doctor says to do something, I get a couple of opinions, but I believe in medicine and I believe in science.
Oh yeah.
And this is not a political discussion about this.
I get
this
you.
is just like, okay, so I'm following rules, and every time I would go online and look at what was going on just to sort of keep my brain, up to date, I would see some of my colleagues performing shows live in venues, and then the next week the numbers would go up and things would shut down again.
Right.
And I was getting so frustrated. I just wanted to say to all of my musician friends, look, and live event people.
You wanted to say cut it out?
Just stop for a little bit so that we can get this under control, so that we can all get back to doing this, because I'm losing my mind. Like, I am really losing my mind. And
man.
It was dark. It was really a dark time.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't think someone who doesn't spend a lot of time in the performing sort of area as a career would understand that this is as severe as I'm making it sound. I actually contemplated what
somebody
guitars.
who doesn't understand the relationship to it's like a source of nourishment in a sense. And if
Yeah, and the other thing that I actually contemplated, and I've only sold one guitar in my entire life that I've owned. I've had every guitar I've ever bought, I still own. I actually thought to myself, should I just sell some of these guitars? They're just sitting here collecting dust.
Oh wow!
And what am I doing? Like, what am I doing? I already gave up the I'm going to be a rock star dream a long, long time ago. I don't play music for fame and fortune. I play music for my soul, which is why I moved, to Nashville from New York and walked away from stuff, is because I play music for my soul. So now you've taken away the one thing that's sort of like can balance out, like, oh, is there a lot of work going on? No, I'm not really doing a lot of voiceover work right now, or whatever, or it's terrible weather going. Oh, but I still have my music, right? But here I didn't have my music. I tried to do a thing where I was doing a song every month and recording it and releasing it. Creatively, it kept me, going in a good direction here and there. But I would release the song and then say, am I ever going to get a chance to play this song live for anyone?
Right.
Or does it just disappear into the ether?
Right.
So I think my trial, and it's still going on, is, and we got to play some live shows. I've played 3 live shows now. 3 live shows in 2 years. Okay. I played 1 outdoor concert with my band, which was a nice, safe, fun, great event. And that was exhausting and amazing. And it was so good to see my bandmates again, who are my dear friends, and create with them and play with them. And the audience was actually 4 live shows, I'm sorry. 3 Eric Stuart band shows, but one, the first thing I did was I was asked to do a Springsteen song in this Springsteen tribute night that we were doing every year. And I did 1 song. And I have to tell you, I was incredibly nervous. It was exhausting. I thought I did well, but it was also like using muscles I hadn't used before. Just getting up there on stage. But the audience was just so happy. Yeah. All of the audiences I played for so far, the 4 shows, have been so happy that someone is actually playing some live music. But I think that in terms of the allies, I think it's, when you do go to these dark places, and you do, I do share, without getting too deep on social media, some of my struggles with, trying to create and this and that, and fans who reach out, fans and friends who reach out and say, oh man, I look what I'm playing in my car, and they've got the CD on, or if people still have a CD player, or they're streaming it on Spotify. They're playing Eric Stuart Band music, and they're like, man, this song came on today on my playlist, and man, I got it cranked up, and I'm driving down the highway listening to your music. I love your stuff, or your music gets me through such tough times, and the way that you that I can relate to the stories you tell. So getting that feedback was definitely my ally. Those were definitely my allies. But the other thing was, when I finally did get a chance to play and perform in front of people, we did a show at the Bitter End in New York, which was the first time I had seen my parents in 2 years, to go visit them. And of course, as we know, I need to multitask, so I couldn't just go and visit them. I said, well, if I'm going to go to New York for the first time in 2 years to see them, I need to book a show. I need to bring my girlfriend. It needs to be everything, right? Yeah. So we went up there and played this show, a little acoustic duo show with my dear friend Phil Nix, lead guitar player with my band, and basically, it was like almost a sold-out show. It was one of the first. Everyone needed to be vaccinated, no mask shows at the Bitter End, and it was fantastic. It was a fantastic night. The audience was great. the club owner was so happy to see me, and he's a curmudgeon. So the fact that he was and I love him, but the fact that he had a smile on his face, that was another one of the, like, we as a community are the allies in times like that, or the times like these that we're going through. But I'm not, I'm not done with it. I'm definitely not done with it. I just started riding the bike again. I want to lose the couple of extra pounds that I put on by sitting around not doing much. I'm writing, but we're trying to coordinate some more. We got another show coming up in a couple of weeks, and there's a little bit of that, but I still think there's this big question mark. And until I know that it's going to be a new normal, but until I know that I can actually come up with some sort of plan, because I need to plan shows. We're not talking about life plans. But some sort of plan so that, if things are on my calendar, if they're in the schedule, then I feel better.
Yeah.
Even if they get moved or canceled or whatever. But when you look at a blank calendar and you're just like, oh, well, there's some holidays on there and people's birthdays come up, but what am I doing? And I definitely need to get more. I need to get more creative, performing energy back in my life, or I don't know what I don't live to be. I love my job as a voice actor, but that's not my goal in life.
Right.
At some point, people will hopefully enjoy the shows I've worked on or things like that, and it's great to revisit some of those things. I get that, but my catalog of work as a songwriter is kind of like that's the book I'm writing. So and actually, just as a little additional thing, one of the things I decided to do about a week or maybe a week and a half ago was I've been writing songs since 8th grade.
Wow.
And I have huge books because I'm a very OCD with this stuff. I have huge books of the lyrics printed out in protective sleeves in giant binders. I've kept them in there. Every time I write a song, I print it out and tuck it away. Sometimes I don't have a recording of it. Most I do, but sometimes I don't. But I still have the lyric. I always keep the lyric. So I've decided, and this is my first announcement of this, I'm going to release a book as if it was poetry of all the songs, just the lyrics that I've written since I started writing.
That's super awesome, man. I mean, wow.
And so I made a list of I think I'm at like 250 or so far.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yes. And it's fun to just go back. I mean, let's talk about motivation and talk about something that hopefully can get you through these things. As I sat down and started to, format these lyrics into a book form, and had to double check some older songs just to make sure that I typed them out correctly, if I did have them recorded. And to listen to 18-year-old Eric singing a song, because I started professionally recording at 15. There was a recording studio around the corner from my school, and I would go there and clean up and organize and whatever in return for studio time. So I've been recording for a long, long time. And so
that's amazing.
And so to go through this stuff and see 1986 I did this song, that's crazy.
That is crazy.
But what the motivating part about, at least one of the main things I've found, is I look at what 15-year-old, or let's say maybe 20-year-old Eric wrote.
Yeah.
And think, can 53-year-old Eric relate to that?
Right.
And maybe hopefully my singing has gotten better over the years. But the overall sort of approach to what I do, I could sing those songs.
Right.
I could easily go back and sing a song I wrote, 17, 18, whatever, and you would say, yeah, that just sounds like, and not to sound like I haven't matured. It's more like I was writing that like with a mature sort of approach to relationships very early on. And it's very interesting to read that stuff. Not so much just listen to them, but read them as little short poems.
Right. Right.
So anyway.
That's amazing, man. I don't think I've made 250 of anything except mistakes daily.
Yeah, I was a little, I think I might have, I think my number is really like 300 songs, but there's only 250 that I would include.
You'll admit to?
Right.
We'll forget those other ones.
Yeah. A couple of them I was like, I don't know.
Why won't you date me? Why won't you date? We don't need that one. We don't need that one.
Right.
That's amazing, man. Well, I mean, that's a great discussion you just gave us. You shared with us about this well. I think a lot of people are familiar with, and people pulling yourself out of that well. Sometimes I've described it to friends or family. I feel like there's this whirlpool that I'm just able to not fall completely into. But I'm definitely circling on the edge. And another ally I would point out in what you just shared is Lindsay.
Yeah, sure. Yeah,
and that's a special, and that's something that she did for you, in the telling of that story, but obviously that's a relationship that you mutually create.
Sure,
so that's a great thing.
Yeah, I think finally, and of course we can touch upon that maybe in a future podcast. We can talk about the magic of a good relationship. But I will say that music is what brought the two of us together in the first place. I mean, she can actually sing and play, but she won't say that she's very good, but she is. But that's not her. That she's a painter, and now she's actually taking classes to be a filmmaker, which is really a very creative person. But she also has an understanding that what makes me complete is having that music as part of who I am, and she enjoys, my music, which is nice for a change. But it's one of those things where, I mean, she pushed me and she kept pushing me to just for her to just play, because she knew that she gets the joy of me playing, but also, I'm a much nicer person when I'm actually, doing that, because we can definitely take that out in the wrong places. But no, I definitely have an ally in Lindsay with that. So that's true.
That's awesome. Well, even though we have been talking about trials and challenges and things that keep getting in our way, or feeling like hurdles, talking to you is never a challenge, Eric.
Oh, that's nice. You're in the minority.
Well, no, but thanks for sharing what you did today. I know everybody can relate to that place you've been and the steps you need to make to get out of it. So that was awesome.
Yeah, and to you, thank you for sharing and to really sort of let people into a part of your world that's very personal. But
also universal. Yeah, everybody knows grief. Everybody knows grief.
And I think by talking about that stuff and talking about most things, so that people can see that other people are going through tough times or have gone through tough times or what they're doing to deal with it, is helpful. And so I appreciate that. I appreciate that.
Yeah, and these tough times are maybe moments where you question how you're going to get through or if you'll get through. But if we take the structure of Joseph Cambell as any kind of indication, it's not the end of the journey. Mm-hmm. So I would like to leave on a note of encouragement to everybody who's listening. To whatever you're dealing with, live your moments like you mean them. None of us has earned the time that we're given, but you're the only one who can spend it.
Was that a Dan Green?
That is from me. You can tattoo that somewhere. Don't tell me where, though. And with that, we come to the end of another episode of The Heart of the Cards, a conversation about creativity, inspiration, and dealing with what you're dealt.
Thanks for listening to The Heart of the Cards with Dan Green and Eric Stuart. We hope this conversation in some way spoke to you. Whatever your journey, we look forward to crossing paths again in the next episode. This is Veronica Taylor, and on behalf of Andromeda Productions, we wish you well.
Andromeda, always a sound choice.